The Katyn Massacre stands as one of the darkest chapters in the history of World War II. In the spring of 1940, thousands of Polish military officers, intellectuals, and leaders were systematically murdered by the Soviet NKVD. Their silent graves in the forests around Katyn remained a chilling secret for years. For decades, the world was shrouded in lies and political manipulation surrounding this atrocity. The mass execution not only devastated Poland's elite, but symbolized the brutal suppression of an entire nation's spirit and identity. Those who perished were the brightest minds, the defenders of freedom and sovereignty. This is the story of betrayal, death, silence, and the relentless search for truth. A journey that spans decades and crosses the fragile boundaries between memory and history. The world of the late 1930s was a tinderbox of ambition, betrayal, and fear. After years of tension, Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union signed the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact in 1939, secretly agreeing to divide Eastern Europe between them. Poland, trapped between two totalitarian giants, found itself isolated and vulnerable. On September 1, 1939, Germany invaded Poland from the west. Just over 2 weeks later, on September 17th, the Soviet Union struck from the east. This double invasion led to the swift and brutal partition of Polish territory, tearing families, cities, and dreams apart almost overnight. For the Polish people, the betrayal by neighboring powers was a bitter reality. The promises of Western allies crumbled in the face of brutal occupation, leaving Poland abandoned and bleeding at the hands of two merciless regimes. As Soviet forces swept through eastern Poland, they quickly targeted the country's backbone, its officers, teachers, lawyers, priests, and leaders. The NKVD arrested tens of thousands of these individuals under the false pretense of re-education or protection. But the reality was far more sinister. Polish prisoners were often rounded up at gunpoint, separated from their families, and transported to remote camps. Many were initially confused, believing they would be exchanged as prisoners of war. Yet, behind the hollow reassurances lurked a systematic plan of annihilation. These men, representing the intellectual and military elite of Poland, were marked for destruction. Their fate was sealed not by any crimes they committed, but by the threat they posed to Soviet control over Poland's future. The transport of prisoners to their final destinations was brutal and dehumanizing. Officers were crammed into cattle cars with barely enough room to sit, deprived of food, water, and basic sanitation for days on end. The inhumanity of the journey mirrored the grim end that awaited them. The prisoners were taken to camps such as Kozelsk, Starobelsk, and Ostashkov, where they faced months of uncertainty, interrogations, and forced declarations of loyalty to Soviet ideology. Yet, many remained steadfast, refusing to betray their homeland or their beliefs. When the final orders came, they were told they would be transferred to new facilities. Instead, the prisoners were loaded onto trucks and taken deep into the forests. There, in the cold shadow of the trees, their journey and their lives were brought to a brutal end. Deep within the Katyn forest, executioners carried out the horrific plan with cold efficiency. Prisoners, often bound and blindfolded, were led individually or in small groups to the edge of mass graves. One by one, they were shot at close range, a single bullet to the back of the head. The executions were designed to be swift, methodical, and utterly secret. The NKVD operated in silence, burying the bodies layer upon layer in hastily dug pits. These mass graves swallowed not just human lives, but the future of an entire nation. By the end of the operation, approximately 22,000 Polish citizens, soldiers, police officers, academics, and civil servants, were dead. Their graves, hidden beneath the forest floor, became a silent monument to betrayal and unimaginable cruelty. After committing the massacre, Soviet authorities launched a massive cover-up operation. They destroyed documents, falsified records, and fabricated entire narratives blaming the atrocities on Nazi Germany. Anyone who dared question the official version risked imprisonment, exile, or death. The Soviet Union used its influence over global media and political institutions to bury the truth. Even after the end of World War II, discussing Katyn and Soviet-controlled territories was forbidden, and the memory of the victims was erased from public life. Generations of families lived in agonizing uncertainty, forbidden to mourn openly. the silence was not just political, it was deeply personal, a wound that festered in the collective memory of a nation denied justice. In 1943, as German forces advanced into Soviet-held territory, they uncovered the mass graves at Katyn. Eager to exploit the discovery for propaganda purposes, Nazi officials publicized the massacre to the world, blaming it entirely on the Soviet Union. International experts were brought in to examine the bodies in the site, confirming that the killings occurred in 1940, at a time when the area was under Soviet control. Despite this, the political complexities of the war led many Allied governments to suppress the findings. Thus, Katyn became not only a site of mass murder, but also a pawn in the brutal chess game of global politics. The truth was sacrificed in the name of wartime alliances, and the victim's dignity was once again violated. It was not until the late 1980s and early 1990s, with the collapse of the Soviet Union, that the full truth about Katyn began to emerge. Documents were declassified, confessions were made, and Russia officially acknowledged Soviet responsibility for the massacre. Memorials were erected both in Poland and on the site of the killings. Families who had suffered in silence for decades could finally speak openly about their loss. Historians and investigators painstakingly worked to reconstruct the events and identify the victims. Today, Katyn stands as a solemn reminder of the dangers of totalitarianism, the cost of political betrayal, and the enduring power of memory. The forest no longer hides its dead, it honors them. Katyn not only shocked Poland, but also had far-reaching consequences for international relations in the 20th century. After the war, during the Cold War, the Katyn Massacre became a key element of the ideological divide. Following the German discovery of the mass graves, the incident was used as anti-Soviet propaganda, but it also became a point of contention between Poland and the USSR. It wasn't until the 1990s, with the collapse of communism, that discussions about the truth began to emerge. Russia's eventual acknowledgement of responsibility for the massacre became a symbol of the difficult path to reconciliation, which remains a sensitive issue in Polish-Russian relations today. Katyn still stands as an unspoken point of tension where national memory and politics collide. After the fall of the USSR and as communism was gradually dismantled, Katyn became a symbol of the fight for truth and justice, as well as the revival of Polish national identity. In 2010, on the 70th anniversary of the massacre, a tragic plane crash occurred in Poland, taking the lives of the country's highest officials, who were on their way to attend the commemoration in Katyn. This devastating event further highlighted the importance of remembering Katyn and its victims. Today, after many years of silence, Katyn is not only a part of history, but also a cornerstone of Poland's collective identity. The memory of Katyn continues to be present in Poland's political, social, and cultural life, and remains significant in international context, where the process of acknowledging full responsibility for this heinous act continues.